Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have such a privilege to have such a high-profile speaker and the panel to discuss on a very, very important, relevant theme today. Over to Mr. Kumaraswamy to take it forward. Mr. Kumaraswamy.
Thank you so much, Group Captain Vijay Kumar ji. I think that was AI reading, is it? As Professor Dolakia's name is.
Kiya kar de.
Yeah, that's right. Good evening, all. And my intro will take about 7 minutes, where I'll talk about the challenges as well as a little more about Professor Dolakia. Actually, we are fortunate to have him, and we should have had him physically, but for the goings on in Indigo. And incidentally, he was on the board of Air India, and he, along with Dr. Gusharan Das, was primarily responsible through their oversight of through the independent directorships, convinced the government to sell off. And that was, very pretty close monitoring through their independent directorships. I wonder if the goings on in Indigo would have happened if a similar oversight was provided in Indigo's board also. I have had the benefit of the mentorship, I should call it, a professor without being a student of his. He joined IIM later. I happened to meet him during one of the meetings of Dr. Ashish Nanda, who became the director. And I met him in one of his parties and somehow struck a card. And almost 12, 13 years later, we have been maintaining our conversations, and it has been of immense benefit to me. Although I don't know what he gets out of it, but I have been immense beneficiary of this association. His commitment to the students is total, you won't believe it. Recently, I completed my PhD, hardly a month old. And although he is not a formal member of my TAC, I had sent my thesis to him. And knowing fully well he was in US or Canada at that time with his grandchildren. And 30, 40 days, no response. And I thought perhaps I overreached. And suddenly comes the papers completely with even spelling mistakes and grammatical errors corrected. And one serious flaw in one of the innocuous looking graphs getting pointed out. It took about 2 or 3 days for me to even understand the question. After that, I had a call with him. He kept on saying, you are not very clear conceptually. You are not very clear conceptually. Define y-axis for yourself first and then to me. Then you can convince me. Although it was a little deflating at that time, it took about 6-7 days for me to understand what he's saying, and a further 45 days to correct it. But I tell you, it gave a completely new dimension to my thesis, leading to the mathematical formulation of what I was saying. Thank you, Professor, for that insightful, what should I say, almost a reprimanding kind of comment, which you just wouldn't give up. Yeah, that was great. Very foresightful, and just smelling it wrong is fantastic. A truly remarkable mentor for whom mentees' progress seems to be the only reward. Despite his seriously forthright nature, he balances things: opinion with facts, theoretical concepts with grounded practice. His shoes are dirty, as they say, because it's soaked in reality at the ground level. And having been in so many committees and practical with practical knowledge, but his head is very, very conceptually clear. And fortunately, we have 2 or 3 more people attending our conference today who are of a similar genre. There is Dr. Bhanumurthy and Dr. Suresh Babu from MIDS. Dr. Bhanumurthy is the director of Madras School of Economics, and Dr. Suresh Babu of MIDS. And I hope Chennai makes the best use of them while they are here, because the center of gravity for these people is obviously Delhi. You either go to the Planning Commission, Niti Aayog, or ICRIAR or something. So please make the best use of them while they are here. I also see Dr. Charan Singh, ex-RBI and current chairman of EGRO, another website which hosts leading economists in chat shows. Thank you, Dr. Singh. Incidentally, I don't know about Charan, I think he is from New Zealand, PhD. Incidentally, if with a tongue-in-cheek I can make a remark, none of them are from JNU. May you live in interesting times is a Chinese proverb which has got, exported everywhere, and as ubiquitous as their Manchurian and noodles now. And I've had to figure out, though, what is the meaning, whether it is a blessing or a curse. But we live in such times now. It started with COVID, where once again Chinese proved that whatever they do it on world scale, nothing else, nothing less, and followed by a succession of wars which seem to be never ending. And Trump's tariffs, which is the only thing which defies gravity. It defies gravity of understanding as well. As if this is not enough, in the last about 10 days, Japan's meltdown has started. US has started genuflecting to Venezuela, if you are following the stories. If Nixon nixed conversion of dollar into gold, it looks like US is trending towards a situation where it will not be able to convert dollars for dollars. I don't think they will be even able to raise enough debt to repay their maturing debt. In all this midst, India maintains sanity with a combo of high growth and low inflation. And if we do maintain this kind of combo for next 6-7 quarters, maybe many macroeconomic theories may need to be revisited. To help us understand, figure out the complex web of financial stability, inflation targeting, and monetary policy, we have Professor Dolakia. He has been a member of various committees of the government, both at the central and state level. He was also in the sixth pay commission. He was a member of the first monetary policy committee, and he has been a director on GSFC, NCDX, Power Finance Corporation, State Trading Corporation, Air India, Union Bank, and several other things. Of course, recently, he is a director in RBI and NABARD for the last 2 or 3 years, where this one have been immense. And he's also worked as consultant with organizations like WHO, UNICEF, World Bank, UNDP, Hewlett Foundation, United Nations, UN Mongolia, etc. Besides all this, of course, is a professor. He has guided 41 students to their PhD. He has 49 monographs, 23 books, more than 140 research articles. I am talking about the same person, not different people. So huge, humongous achievement for his time. And thanks the ever so efficient Vijay Kumarji for facilitating this, and also to the other Vijay Kumar for the excellent introduction. And Ms. Lokeshwari, she's an exception among the current day reporters. No razzmatazz and unwanted detours. Straightforward, incisive analysis of comments and about the economy and financial world, which is very good to read. Thanks, Lokeshwari ji, for accepting my suggestion to be on the panel. The plan will be as follows. Professor will speak for about 30-35 minutes. After that, the MMA's main customers are the audience. So we'll give the preference of the first question to the audience, followed by Lokeshwari ji and then me. We'll do it through 2 rounds, and after that, throw it open to the audience completely. Thanks, and Professor Dolakia, we are here to hear you.
Thank you very much for all the introduction and this opportunity to address a very wide, qualified audience, very keenly interested and obviously a very relevant kind of audience for the topic, namely the monetary policy, inflation, and financial stability. The tag is important, managing the trilemma. Because the trilemma is basically a question about, in theory, the trilemma occurs when you have a fixed exchange rate, which leads to the financial stability. When you have the capital account convertibility, in the sense that there is a free flow of capital, international capital, and then there is a independent monetary policy. These 3 things together is considered an impossibility. So it is an impossible kind of achieve. I mean, having a fixed exchange rate, open capital account, and the independent monetary policy. It was shown by a Nobel laureate that this is not likely to be achieved. That is why it is called trilemma. Now, I'm not saying that we are managing trilemma at all. we are into this trilemma. We are facing this trilemma all the time. My basic purpose in this 30 minutes or 35 minutes that I am supposed to speak to begin with is that let me just chart out what exactly has been the logic or what has been the philosophy or ideology behind this kind of effectiveness of monetary policy. Okay, there is, monetary policy is considered effective and all that. There is a huge debate about this in the literature. In the long run, monetary policy is not supposed to be effective at all. But in the short run, it makes a sense. Now, I would rather briefly point out and briefly chart out what exactly is the logic. And then I will definitely take this opportunity to voice my serious concerns about this framework. Because it is unfortunate that we have practically adopted this framework without questioning and without really trying to modify it to suit our economy. I think that is something which I have been throughout in my, as Kumar Swami said, whatever, writings, etc., that I have been making, and particularly of recent origin after 2016, you will find that I have been always questioning and I am always onto this kind of things, that somehow we are missing out the basic essence. So let me start with this. What is the current logic? This is derived from the Western countries, basically from the developed countries standpoint. Now, what is the developed country? Please understand one thing. Developed country is a stagnant economy. Is a stagnant economy in the sense that urbanization is at the peak. Nothing changes there. The structure of the employment is practically the same between primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. It is more or less the same. It is a stagnant thing. The growth rate is typically in the range of 1 and 2%. If you consider the real growth, it is again 1.5%, 1 to 1.5%. That is the kind of growth that you are talking about. Inflation rate is about 2%, 2.5%, depends on this. But this is the kind of the characteristics of the developed countries. We, on the other hand, and I'm very categorically mentioning this because very many people very enthusiastically adopt those theories and those frameworks which are essentially meant for the developed countries. The developed countries, as I defined, were with these features. Okay. Our country, on the other hand, is a complete dynamic economy. It's a complete dynamic economy. Everything keeps changing. Like, say, for instance, urbanization is at a very fast rate and it is increasing. It is increasing. We were 31% of the urban areas in 2011. By now, people are talking about 35%, but I believe that we are close to 40% by now. And we are likely to be very, very rapidly growing, because once you cross 30% of urbanization, the growth of urban areas is phenomenal. And again, we are not properly capturing the urban area as per the definition in the census. Our measurement itself is faulty. Okay, that itself. I'm not talking about the concept. Concept is correct, but the measurement is not correct. It is not reflecting the same thing. So anyway, what I'm saying is that there is something which is expanding very rapidly. Simultaneously, we find that there is a tremendous kind of the structural shifts taking place in the employment structure, in the capital structure, in the infrastructure development, you name the thing. And you find that the things are moving at an unprecedentedly fast rate. We are experiencing that rate of technological progress, which is unparalleled to the rest of the world. I think it is beyond question. Therefore, our growth is no longer in terms of 1 and 2%. Our growth in real terms, even under this kind of circumstances, it is about 6.5% to 7%, whereas our potential is likely to be around 8 to 8.5%. And if therefore we are clocking 8.2% during the last quarter, I am not surprised. We are only nearing our target, our potential. That is the kind of a thing. As far as the inflation is concerned, inflation is typically around 4 to 5% or maybe more. Marginally more. If you take the trend rate, it is likely to be 4.5 to 5%. But the question is that our inflation is again not 2% and 2.5%. It is also more. Therefore, I think when we consider these kind of things, please keep these things at the back of your mind, that we are talking about an economy which is completely different from the economies which are leading to this framework. The framework that I am now going to briefly talk about. The basic premises for the monetary policy, conduct of monetary policies are, and this is very relevant. One is that inflation is a demand-driven phenomenon. If inflation was supply-driven phenomenon, the monetary policy doesn't have the same kind of effectiveness, doesn't have the same relevance. So inflation is demand-driven. That is the first thing. In most of the developed countries, this is the case. Inflation is a monetary phenomenon. Another very important premise. Inflation is a monetary phenomenon. What is the meaning of that? That if I change the money supply and the liquidity in the system, it is going to result into the corresponding proportionate increase in the price level rather than any changes in the real economy in the long run. So that is the kind of thing. So inflation is predominantly a monetary phenomenon. By controlling the money supply, you can control the inflation. That is the meaning of this. Okay. So you derive the effectiveness of monetary policy through this thing. That inflation is predominantly monetary phenomenon. And the purpose of monetary policy is to control inflation. The third thing is, and this is very, very significant, the third thing is, in the long run, money is neutral. Which means that in the long run, the money cannot influence the real variables in the system. Real variables will remain the same. It is only the proportionate change in the prices that you are going to have. I think these are some of the basic premises. The implication of the third one is that if I want to disinflate, if I want to bring down the inflation rate in the long run, there are no costs involved in the long run. That means that the basic trade-off does not exist in the long run. The trade-off exists only in the short run. This is the kind of the premise, and these are the basic things which are there in the thing. And I am again just reminding that I think Raghuram Rajan, when he was the governor, and Urjit Patel, when he was the governor, these two gentlemen have stated these things explicitly in the media and everywhere else. So I am not presupposing or presuming something. This is already stated explicitly by the governors of the Reserve Bank of India. Okay? And this has been the tradition, this has been the entire thing. The whole inflation targeting framework came from these three premises. So this is important to understand. Now the question is, how do I get these three things? What is the framework? The framework is simple, very famous quantity equation. The quantity equation says that when you have price and when you multiply it with quantity, you get the expenditure, total expenditure. If you have only one item, this is the correct thing. If you have hundreds of items or thousands of items, then you find that there is something called aggregate price and there is something called aggregate quantity, and that should be equal to the aggregate expenditures, which is basically in terms of the money, you have to say that this is money supply. But it will not be money supply per se, because money does circulate. If an average unit of money circulates in the system 5 times, then you don't require 100, you require only 20, because you have to multiply it with the velocity of circulation to get 100. And that is the basic equation. Now, this is an identity. Please understand, it is true by definition of velocity. The entire framework gets developed out of this is, if you assume that velocity is constant, and if you assume that this entire equation is now converted into a dynamic form, then the equation becomes very simple. The growth of money supply is exactly equal to the inflation rate plus the growth of real income, or what is known as GDP. This is the basic thing. Therefore, what you are saying is, growth in the long run is not affected by the money, because money is neutral. Therefore, if you control the growth of money supply, you are controlling the rate of inflation. This is something which is important to realize and understand. What inflations are? Inflation in this case is the GDP deflator inflation, not the consumer price inflation. It is the GDP deflator, which means it includes everything that it gets included in the GDP. Whereas consumer price index is only those things on which consumers spend their income. Is that clear? Therefore, there is a difference. There is a distinction here, which we have introduced. We means the economists have introduced for the monetary policy to become more relevant or relevant sounding. Okay, let us be very clear. Now the point is that this is very true. This always obtains in a closed economy. The moment you open up the economy, the open economy means that capital flows in and out. When the capital starts flowing in and out, it depends on the interest rates. So if the interest rates are properly aligned in the global sense, then the flows are stabilized. And therefore, you can basically control the money supply through controlling the interest rates. It is for this reason that you find that in an open economy system, you have the interest rate as the instrument of monetary policy rather than the growth of money supply. That entire focus has changed. Nobody now talks about the growth of money supply or the money supply per se. People start talking about in interest rates. And therefore, repo rate, which is an indicative rate for the rest of the interest rate structure, you find that it is that thing which is the basic instrument for monetary policy. Now comes the trilemma kind of a thing, because, in order to ensure that the growth of money supply is kept under control and is reasonably managed, you have to manage the interest rate in such a way that there is an interest parity, and there is interest parity implies that you have to have the inflation rate parity. That means that the exchange rate, because that is the basic indicator for the financial stability. If you are talking about the financial stability, the exchange rate is an important parameter. Now, the exchange rate management would imply that you have to focus on the inflation rate parity. That is the reason why the inflation targeting becomes a very important matter in this context. The international rate of interest, that is the US rate of interest, we can say as a proxy, is about say 4 to 5%, and our rate of interest is typically about 6.5%. So there is this becomes a parity. I am not talking about equality, talking about parity. Now, Samuelson-Balassa hypothesis says that a country can afford to have a higher inflation rate provided it also has higher productivity of resources. I'm talking about total factor productivity growth. Okay. Now, a developing country invariably has, and particularly India, as I was already talking, already has a very high rate of the technological progress. Our rate of technological progress, or what you say, the total factor productivity growth, is about 2 percentage points higher than the US or the developed world. Okay. Therefore, we can afford to have a 2% higher rate of inflation compared to the developed countries. That means if they have about 2.5%, we can afford to have 4.5% rate of growth without putting any pressure on the exchange rate in the long run. Please understand, this is exactly the framework. All these frameworks will ensure that there are financial stabilities, that is, a reasonable stability of exchange rate. Then there is a reasonable inflation targeting with certain flexibilities here and there, and that there is an interest parity also. I think this is exactly how the monetary system and the monetary policy framework is supposed to be working. Now, I have some very significant and very serious concerns about this entire framework. And that is what I would rather now like to turn to. And before I complete and conclude, I have whatever concerns are there, I'll point out and then just conclude the matter. My first concern is that all these are the long-term relationships. In the short run, these things don't work. In the short run, it is only the expectations of the stakeholders which matter. So they drive these kind of things, financial stability on one hand, that is exchange rate fluctuations on one hand, the interest rate fluctuations and the inflations are all subject to largely expectations of the stakeholders. That is number one. That explains short term. But the most relevant matter is that the first premise in the entire framework is that inflation is demand driven. In India, I do not think that inflation is demand driven. Inflation is largely supply driven. This is what is my concern, that we are not somehow modifying the entire framework to do this. When I say that it is supply driven, what it means is that it is not so much the money supply and the monetary and the interest rates, which are of critical significance. It is the growth rate in the system which will drive the whole thing. If the growth is high, inflation is likely to be on a lower side. If the growth is slow, the inflation on the other end is likely to be higher. I think these are the implications of saying that inflation in India is more supply driven rather than demand driven. The second important thing is that in the long run, money is not neutral. I would sound very, very typical guy who would be thrown out of the economics profession because, the whole economics profession thinks that money is neutral in the long run. Actually, the long run that is considered in the monetary theory is not the same thing as the long run that is considered in the growth theory. In the growth theory, the long run is the steady state growth. In the short run, in the monetary policy, the long run is defined as the trend rate of output, which is basically considered the full employment level of income. I think these are the two very different concepts because in the investments are not considered as a very important aspect of demand. They are only considered important aspect of demand. Their capacity creating role has been ignored in the monetary theory. In the growth theory, it is their capacity creating role which is the pivot. Now, when you consider the two things together, in the long run, money does have an influence on the real economic growth in the real economic variables in the system. Money is not neutral in the sense in which it is understood in the monetary theory. This is something. Now, macro policy, monetary policy cannot afford to ignore these kind of things. We are not in a theoretical plane. We are on the ground. If we are on the ground, we have to consider all these aspects very clearly. Okay. The third thing that is very important. If money was neutral, there is nothing called the threshold level of inflation. But money was not neutral. If money is not neutral, then there is something called threshold level of inflation. And threshold level of inflation, the concept itself says that it is that level of inflation which maximizes the growth. That means in the long run, if the inflation is lower than the threshold, it hurts the growth. Growth is sacrificed. If, on the other hand, the inflation is higher than the threshold level of inflation, that also hurts the growth, and you are sacrificing the growth. That means that if you believe in a threshold level of inflation, you have to believe in the fact that money is not neutral even in the long run. In the short run, it is not neutral, everybody knows. In the long run also, it doesn't become neutral. The moment you accept this, the basic thing is, my research shows very categorically, I have shown it with the empirical evidences and all that. This is not the time to go into that. But I'm only saying that threshold level of inflation depends on the fiscal deficit and the current account deficit on the balance of payment. These two parameters are extremely important. That means there is no unique threshold level of inflation. It all depends on the system. Now, fortunately for us, we have been managing the macroeconomy in a wonderful way where all these four parameters, namely the growth, inflation, the fiscal deficit to GDP ratio, and the current account deficit, CAD, to the GDP ratio, are also the ones where you have explicit targets. They are set by different bodies. Like, say, for instance, growth is aspirational target, is about 8.5%, given by the 2047 vision of developed India. Okay, this can happen only if you achieve 8 to 8.5% rate of growth. This is one thing. Second important thing is inflation targeting. The Lok Sabha has given the target and said that it will be 4% plus or minus 2% flexibility. Okay, but the target is 4%. This is also, given. You have fiscal deficit target, you have FRBM Act and all that, which provides you exactly what is the target in the long run. Then it is 3% of the GDP for the center and 3% for the states, put together 6% for the nation as a whole. This is the target that is given. And CAD, there is no explicit target given, but by and large, the prudence suggests that it should not exceed 2.5%. Now the question is, prudence requires you to have CAD targeted at around 2.5%. You have prudence required to target fiscal deficit at around 6%, both combined together, center and state. And then you have a growth target, which is given by the aspirational target by the PMO, saying that it is 8.5%. If these three targets are given, you cannot have independent target for the inflation. It has to be in sync with the remaining targets. All these four are interdependent. I take the liberty to say that it is not a trilemma, sir. It is a quadrille. It's a issue about four things. Only three of them can be decided independently. The fourth one automatically gets decided. If it does not happen, if the four targets are set independently and are contradictory to each other in the sense that they are not consistent in the sense theoretically and empirically, then the question is that you don't have macro stability. That is what I have shown in my presidential address to the Indian Econometric Society. And I'm saying that if the macroeconomic stability is not there, in the sense that the savings and investment don't match, and the employment expectation and the income expectations don't match, then please note, financial stability cannot be guaranteed. In fact, financial stability is a part of the overall macro stability. Unless the macroeconomic stability is there, you cannot have financial stability, which means that your exchange rate will go on fluctuating because you are not meeting certain targets and you are not having an equilibrating forces at work. If these are the cases, then the whole framework becomes a big question mark. Anyway, this is a separate debate. But what I would finally say about the unfortunate, very unfortunate parties of this entire monetary policy, inflation, and financial stability part is that our measurement is far from satisfactory. We are not measuring the inflation rate correctly. Our consumer inflation rate is not measured correctly. It has nothing to do with the backdated the base year. Base year has not been changed for now more than 15 years. I'm not talking about that. That is a known limitation. I'm talking about more serious matter. We are measuring the inflation with the household consumer expenditure survey and survey-based weights of different items like food, fuel, services, etc. On the other hand, our growth is measured through the weights of the same items in GDP. And just to give you the illustration of how inconsistent and how non-reconciled are the measurements, please note, in our inflation measurement, we are attaching 46% weight to the food. In our GDP calculation and growth measurement, we are putting only 16% weight to the food. Sir, these two don't match. That means either you are mismeasuring your growth or you are mismeasuring your inflation. The most likely error is in the inflation, not in the GDP. Because GDP data are far more reliable and far more consistent. There is no consistency check in inflation. Because the consumer survey data which are being used are typically missing out several things. Services, for instance, are completely missed out. The consumer durables are largely understated. The rich 15% richest people are not at all properly captured in the consumer survey sample. I think these are all very well-known limitations. So if you consider these things, let me just tell you what are the implications in terms of the effective. Because measurement in this country is taken very casually. The seriousness is, what is the inflation right now? The last inflation reading was 0.3%, 30 basis point. Is it clear? Sir, it is very low, extremely low, and people will get panicky if somebody says that inflation is only 0.3%. On the other hand, if I put the correct weight of the food and many other items which are derived from the national accounts rather than the household surveys, then the inflation turns out to be 1.72%. The same. So the mismeasurement is to what extent? 0.3%, 0.30% to 1.72%. What do you expect the Monetary Policy Committee to do? Can this be the basis on which any policy decision be taken? If anybody says that I have taken the decision based on these figures, I only pity them. We have to go beyond that, and therefore these numbers become meaningless. Sir, unless we do this kind of the corrections, there is no hope. I would say that we are going to commit blunders while taking the decisions, because the basis on which we take the decisions are wrong. We have to correct that at the earliest. This is the most urgent need. If you want financial stability, if you want inflation to be controlled, if you have a monetary policy which is meaningful and relevant, sir, you have to have good measurement and ignore some of this framework that I was talking about. We have to concentrate more on growth at this juncture. That is the need of the day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, unmute yourself, Mr. Kumarasamy.
Yes, okay. Thanks, Professor, for that brilliant exposition of the various facets of the economy, which have to be managed in a synchronized fashion. That is fiscal deficit, CAD, growth, and inflation. And I really hope that with the measurement concerns that you had raised, that even if somebody is attempting to manage them in a synchronized fashion, they are indeed measuring and they are indeed managing the actual stuff rather than some apparitions. That's this one.